Well, when we were planning this service, all we were thinking of was Pam's last Sunday. And in the last 3 days or so, things have changed. As Karen mentioned, we have staying at our place the ministers of High River United Church. And I don't know about you, but we're kind of in shock still in our household. So I'd like to add one more reading. This is from Psalm 46. Now, in the last part of Psalm 46, interestingly enough, given the still small voice reading for today, in the last part of the psalm is the verse, "Be still and know that I am God." And I think in the middle part, I see the next anthem is "River in Judea," and I'm thinking that that comes from the middle part of this psalm. But this is the first verse. God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult, we will not fear. I've been reading sermons by a fellow named Fred Craddock lately. I've mentioned him to some of you. He's an amazing fellow, consistently listed as one of the finest preachers in the English language. He is retired now in his 80s, but he still serves a church in an out-of-the-way part of the Appalachian Mountains in the southeast states and teaches the poorest kids in America how to read. In one of his sermons, he's describing the diversity in his congregation, and it's considerable. Some people, he says, show up every week for worship, come to every Bible study that's offered. It's interesting how he describes them. He said, they're making deposits into their faith account so that when crisis hits, they can write a check to sustain them. Others, he said, don't worry about that. They say, whatever comes, I can handle it. They don't know yet that they can't. I suspect retirement is something Pam can handle, probably. On the other hand, the earth is certainly changing for her and for us too. But this flood is one of those things that we can't just shrug off. Thank God that there has been very little loss of life, considering how fast this came upon us. But the scope of the loss and the scale of the job to be done leaves us in shock. In our story, Elijah has just had his moment of triumph. He has just played his best card, won his biggest battle, and it wasn't enough. His big victory is followed immediately by a death threat from Queen Jezebel, and we know now that she had both the will and the way to carry those things out. Nothing had changed in spite of Elijah's best effort, and he was plunged into depression and fled for his life. This time he went south into Judah, as far south as his strength could carry him. And then he sat down under a tree and asked to die. Enough, he said. I'm done. This is more than I can take. He had been making deposits into his faith account for all his life, and he still couldn't handle it. There's a couple things about this story that strike me. I'll just mention them and leave that be for now. The first thing that God does when Elijah breaks down is give him food and rest. An angel comes and bids him eat and sleep. That simple recipe is a huge part of grace in crisis. Simple, practical care. Eat and sleep. If you're in shock, if you're overwhelmed by the loss that you face, eat and sleep. Maybe it feels selfish to do that. Maybe you don't think you have time to care for yourself. No, you have to. Otherwise, the journey, the cleanup, the restoration will be too much for you. And I know, too, that there are quite a number of angels sitting in this room in front of me and throughout Alberta these days. Messengers of grace from police and fire and emergency personnel to our mayor and city councillors who themselves have gone without eating and sleeping of late, to countless folks who have provided shelter and all manner of help. I've been fed by angels quite recently, as a matter of fact. It's good, basic grace. Meeting simple needs, getting things done. It's important. It matters. It makes a difference. Thanks to all of you who are being angels at the moment. Eat and sleep. The other thing I notice is that God sends Elijah back into the thick of things. That's all God does, really. It almost feels callous on God's part. He just sends Elijah back into the thick of things with a stack of instructions. But I do think there's a bit more to it than that. First, Elijah seems to experience God in a very particular and important way for us here and now. He's up there on Mount Sinai, waiting for God to pass by. And there, passing in front of him, are all the traditional signs of God: earthquake, fire, storm, wind. But Elijah does not find God in any of these. This is what all is supposed to happen on Mount Sinai, but God's not in any of it. All the signs that are supposed to accompany an encounter with God pass by, leaving nothing afterwards but the sound of sheer silence. Have you ever desperately looked for God and encountered nothing but nothing? But that is exactly the holy moment for Elijah. There's a story from near the beginning of the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. was awake late one night when the phone rang at his home. He picked it up, and it was another death threat. Unable to sleep, Martin made a cup of coffee and sat in his kitchen. "I can't do it," he said to himself and to God. "I am not strong enough. I just can't do this." Alone in the silence, every now and again, we scrape to the bottom of our souls and find ourselves lacking. But there in the kitchen, in the dark and the silence and the emptiness, God gave Martin strength and sent him back into the struggle. "I don't know how," he said. "I don't know what happened there in the kitchen, but from that moment I never looked back." Sometimes nothing is full of God. One other thing that's buried there in the instructions Elijah gets. Apparently, God's got all this in hand. There are political undercurrents that Elijah doesn't know about. There are some 7,000 others who are loyal to Yahweh, and Elijah doesn't know one of them. He's not alone, and neither are you and I. People in High River and Canmore and Calgary are about to find out that whatever we face, we're just not alone. Had to drive to Nanton on Saturday. Was it Saturday? Friday? On Friday. The traffic was kind of icky, but I noticed that Calgary drivers were more courteous on Friday than I have ever experienced Calgary drivers. It's good to pull together. We also found out that the Stampede has a new motto: "Come hell or high water." We'll do this, and we'll do it together. And finally, for Pam, one of the instructions Elijah gets is to pass on his prophetic ministry to Elisha. We often forget that what is truly worth doing takes more than a lifetime to do. Part of our ministry, therefore, is to bless the ones who come after us, passing on our ministry, raising up new leaders, blessing those who come after us. That's a crucial part of any ministry. Our tendency is to see ourselves as the center of the universe. No, we're part of something much greater. We do our bit. We share the light. We pass our torch. Where is Pam? I can't find. There she is. There. 42 years. It is not possible to measure such a ministry. The currents that have flowed around you and through you. Just like it's not possible to measure the presence of God. For just when we think that our faith has been pared down to nothing, we discover that emptiness and silence are full of God and have been all along. Today we will bless you, Pam, as you go forth. And we hope that you will bless us and those who follow you here in the ministry of music. And silence or singing, come hell or high water, God will always hold us all. Amen.